3 books on Dr. King. I'm primarily interested in the history of African American religion and culture, and also the history of civil rights crusades, particularly the modern civil rights crusades.
Very good. And of course, I think the two of you have collaborated, as we said earlier, on a book, Between Cross and Crescent. And let's have the two of you give us some information relative to that book, and we, of course, will have an opportunity following the first commercial break to get into some detail in reference to it. But let's have the two of you sort of give us an overview in terms of what the audience can expect from such a publication, and the efforts that have gone into it, and the things that you believe to be important in terms of bringing this as a scholarly work in front of our audience this morning. Let's start off with you, Dr. AAl-Hadid, and of course Dr. Baldwin. I'm almost sure that we'll be interrupted, but we'll pick it up at the end of the first segment.
Yes, I think my involvement started in 1985. It was at that time that I created a concept at Tennessee State University called the Great Debate. And in that forum, we debate current issues from the perspective of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and try to achieve a dialectical synthesis. So it was about that time that I met Dr. Baldwin, and as fate would have it, he was also trying to bring some type of synthesis and some type of common understanding to Dr. King and Malcolm X. And so as he was working at Vanderbilt in terms of writing his books and doing a scholarship, and I was working at Tennessee State organizing the great debates, he and I just kept talking, exchanging ideas, and he would come to the great debates. I would go to his classes, and we worked together. And so finally we just decided, well, let's write this definitive book so that we can thrash out some of the contradictions and the misunderstandings. And so we started working on it. We did a first draft and an outline, and I think he got busy getting his tenure and full professorship at Vanderbilt, and I got busy doing the same thing at Tennessee State and creating the Department of Africana Studies. So once we got all our ducks lined up, he said, well, this will be our capstone activity. And we came back to this project, and we think that this is certainly, this particular book will be a defining moment for both of us. We see it as a capstone experience.
What do you say about this, Dr. Baldwin?
Dr. AAl-Hadid has given you much of the story in terms of how we met in connection with the Great Debate series. One of the things that we realized immediately, of course, is that we both come out of different faith traditions. And as you know, Malcolm was a Muslim and King a Christian. And we've noticed over the years the problems that often exist and the tensions that often exist between Christians and Muslims in the African American community. You often have a lot of competition. Both are proselytizing faiths, and self-righteousness, competition, other problems have often led to differences, fragmentation, tensions. And this book, we decided to write a book that would deal with Martin and Malcolm as sources of dialogue for Christians and Muslims around issues of culture and interfaith dialogue. So as Dr. AAl-Hadid said, the book has been in the making, if I might use that terminology, for about 15, 16 years. Because we've debated, he's been to my class, I've been a part of the Great Debate series, and out of that kind of collaboration, we decided to produce this study. So it's a product of 15 years of research and collaboration.
All dealing with the perspective of Malcolm and Martin in reference to just a whole variety of issues, I would imagine.
Exactly.
Well, now what kind of, and I'm sure you'll get into this later on, but what kind of initial problems you had in terms of bringing these views together, and how were these problems resolved?
Well, I think this is a great time for this book to come out, you know, in light of the things that are happening in the world today, with the tensions between the Christian West and the Islamic East, with African Americans rising to the occasion, calling for reparations, with the resurgence of white supremacy, and with the followers of Dr. King and Malik al-Shabazz now starting to realize that there has to be a central position. In the 60s, you see, they were put in juxtaposition to each other, diametrically opposed. In the Great Debate, we say that Dr. King represents the thesis of integration, assimilation, and then Al-Shabazz represents the antithesis of nationalism and Pan-Africanism. And so when you put these two in tension, sometimes you miss the commonalities, which would be the creative synthesis. And what we're trying to do is to go through all of those apparent differences and to come out with some common themes and commonalities to show that these men were more alike than they were different.
Okay, and of course we'll allow the two of you to talk about those likenesses after this first commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this first commercial